Technology changes constantly, and so does how we go about teaching and learning with these newly developed tools. At South Dakota State University, virtual reality is allowing rare hands-on career training to be an everyday goggles-on educational experience. Recently, SDSU was named one of 7 Metaversities. So what does that mean exactly?
So based on our past and current use of virtual reality, we were chosen by Meta through a company, ed company called Victory XR, to have our campus built out in the metaverse. And we'll be teaching 2 classes this year, this next fall of 2022, that will have virtual reality as a component of those 2 classes.
So did you get some virtual reality goggles and equipment from that?
Yeah, so a part of this partnership is that we have 50 headsets for students to use, and so those students will be able to take those home with them, be able to extend the classroom through the use of virtual reality, and then the build out of our campus will happen as a part of that relationship. So we will have the SDSU Campanile and the campus green, but then our labs in chemistry and anatomy and other spaces will be built in the virtual environment.
So what exactly is virtual reality for somebody who maybe have never put the goggles on themselves?
Yeah, so it's a really hard thing to describe. I think the best thing to do is to say you got to try it to know what it's like. But if you can imagine being on your computer and the ability to simulate any sort of educational environment, whether that's a lecture or a lab, that can happen, but you're interacting with that through a mouse. And so a very kind of different tactile environment than being in the lab. The thing about virtual reality is you can approximate that. You've got 3D spaces, you have the ability to use those controllers to function like your hands would function and to be able to rotate, to be able to grasp, to be able to pour. So if we think about things that happen in the real environment,
right,
real labs, it's not the exact same, but we're starting to get close through virtual reality.
So I know that you mentioned a couple of different degree programs that can use them. So can you maybe describe how something like nursing or any other program too would benefit from that type of practice environment?
Yeah, so we can envision, say, chemistry, which is something that's at the micro level that's really
right,
hard for us to visualize. We can expand that in virtual reality and in 3D and be able to hold that in our hands, whether that's DNA or COVID or cells and molecules. And then the same thing with anatomy. So SDSU has an amazing cadaver program in anatomy. We have thousands and thousands of dollars of physical models that students can hold and touch, but there are limitations to that. You can
right,
only be in lab at certain times. Virtual reality can approximate that in the sense that you can still hold a virtual version of a cadaver, a virtual version of that model, but you can do it at midnight on Friday night and 2 a.m. on Monday when it works for you as a college student.
Well, and there's so many different scenarios in fields like anatomy and in chemistry where simulating something is much easier to do than running into that exact problem in real life. And those are things that you'll face in your career eventually, but like you said, it's important to simulate those things when you might not be able to just witness it firsthand.
Right, so I think that this happens across the professional field,
Yeah.
so you'll see physicians and surgeons being trained in virtual reality because they can repetitively do this work and build a skill set that might not happen in the real world. They might not have enough times to practice that in the real world. And I think that's really important for rural and remote spaces. And so we've had conversations with Vet Science and the SDSU's DDM program that's partnered with the University of Minnesota to be able to simulate in virtual reality some of those cases that are rare.
So you've talked a lot about what the project has done so far. What are your plans for the future as a Metaversity?
So because of all of the momentum, the foundation is pretty well set that we'll have these 2 classes that will launch in this next year. But the doors are pretty wide open, and so we'll start to see, I think, lots of other departments and programs and academic units engaged in this. And one of the other things about this is the outreach piece. So because these are mobile, because the price point is where it is right now, we have the ability to put 12 of these in a suitcase and take it to a rural middle
right,
school or high school and be able to get them in the virtual environment, experiencing things that maybe they couldn't do without this. And so I think on the recruiting and the outreach piece, there's a lot of growth potential. I think on the curriculum side, across the university, there's a lot of growth potential and a lot of partnerships that are continuing to form. And then I think as we think about the workforce, I think there's a lot of potential there as well, because when you think about workforce training, a lot of that is repetitive, and it's something that takes infrastructure. And if you can build that infrastructure in virtual reality, reality, we could be a great partner at SDSU to help business and industry explore those opportunities.